Happy Friday to you all. It's the All 32 pod. I'm Mike Giardi. My cohort, Will Parkinson, on assignment, which is to say, I believe he's at a bachelor party. And I said, you know what? You're traveling on Friday. You have fun. I'll do the thing without you. I'm the old guy. What do I got to do? Absolutely nothing. A reminder to you, as always, except, by the way, to get you ready for week 5, a reminder that this show brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network, and Game Time, best tickets, best prices to get you in to see any event that you want to see. And of course, there are plenty of them. I will be using my press pass to go to the game, and that's what we'll lead off with. Patriots hosting the Dolphins, a pair of 1-3 teams that things don't look good for either one of them. In fact, I would argue that this is the worst game on the week 5 slate. Tyler Huntley on one side, Jacoby Brissett on the other. Of course, that wasn't Miami's plan, right? Tua Tagovailoa was the plan, but he is still dealing with a concussion. Earliest he could return would be week 8. Jacoby Brissett, on the other hand, still keeping Drake May at arm's length, or at least Alex Van Pelt and Elliott Wolf, the general manager, are doing that to keep May on the sideline and continue to marinate while Brissett struggles to run this offense that, quite frankly, isn't giving him a whole bunch of help. Mike McDaniel, we'll talk about no help, though. So McDaniel's now on his 4th quarterback this year. After Tua went down, it was Skylar Thompson, who was the backup quarterback entering the year, won the job over Mike White, who they released. Tim Boyle had to step in when Thompson got injured in the Seattle game. And now Snoop Huntley, who, as DeMarcus Covington, the Patriots defense coordinator, reminded us, was a Pro Bowler, failing to remind us, remember the fact that he threw 2 touchdown passes that year and was like the 9th alternate. So Snoop Huntley, nobody's idea of a Pro Bowler, nobody's idea of a good quarterback, but he is Miami's quarterback. He made his first start on Monday night against Tennessee. He threw for 96 yards, 14 of 22 for 96 yards. He did run for 40, but missed several open receivers. There was a lot of griping on the sidelines, Tyreek Hill chief amongst them. And you have to wonder if things are falling apart for McDaniel, who is supposed to be an offensive genius, right? This is what he gets paid to do. And I tweeted this out under my handle, my Twitter handle, whatever, X, at Mike Giardi. Matt LaFleur took Malik Willis, had him in the system for 2 weeks, changed the entire offense, went run heavy with a mobile quarterback, and won 2 games. Basically stole 2 games without Jordan Love. And obviously they lost when Love returned last week. And as I mentioned on the pod on Monday, I think that falls on LaFleur a little bit. But here's McDaniel, who comes from the Shanahan tree. He's supposed to be a great run game designer. That was his big thing. Instead, he turned out to be the Tua whisperer, built up his confidence, got him to play pretty well. Now Tua's out. And boy, if I'm Tua and I'm sitting at home going, how much money did I make from you guys? How much did I take? 52, 53 million a year? I'm worth like another 10, probably, at least. You guys can't seem to run an offense without me. Mike McDaniel, who got a contract extension this offseason, can't seem to do it without Tua. So a lot on McDaniel, who said, trying to crack codes every week. The other team thus far has done a better job at that than we have. Yeah, I would say, Mike, your team has not had a lead at any point during any game this season. Of course, they got their 1 win. It was a walk-off field goal in the opening week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So a lot of pressure on McDaniel to kind of right the ship here and get the Dolphins going in the right direction. They're averaging 4.6 yards per play this season. That's down almost 2 yards from last year when Tua, of course, was running it at a fairly high level, at least until late in the year, where they averaged 6.5. I mentioned Huntley and the struggles, but it's also the running game. And again, like I mentioned, he's supposed to be, McDaniel's supposed to be this run game designer. Devin Achane, 10 carries for 15 yards last week, and his production without Tua in the lineup has fallen off big time. This is a team, as I mentioned, feels kind of broken. Also won't have Jalen Phillips, their outstanding defensive end, in this contest. He hurt himself again, headed for IR. So they're a mess. But speaking of messes, let's go to the team that I cover on a daily basis, that being the New England Patriots. I brought this up on Monday, and it's sort of taken hold because of some other people, including a team employee, talking about a potential mutiny. But it has been a little bit dysfunctional here the last couple of weeks in particular. And I want to get more to the root of that because it's a coaching thing. And it's a coach versus a coach, if you will. I don't want to pit them off against each other, but Jerod Mayo has separated himself from the offense. He did it a month ago when he called Alex Van Pelt head coach offense. And then as the offense has continued to scuffle during the course of the year, he's constantly pointing out that Van Pelt needs to do a better job. Schematically, we have to do a better job. And of course, my pushback on that would be, do I think Van Pelt is lighting it up? No. And we'll get into some of the reasons why. But the personnel is a massive issue. And it's clear that they want to protect Drake May. They want to have May continue to learn before they throw him out there. And there are plenty of things that we saw in that performance 2 weeks ago, the Thursday night when he mopped up in the Jets game, where, yeah, you said, oh, that's a great play, very athletic. He did this, he did that. He also missed some simple reads. His footwork became very messy again, and that's something they're really guarding against because they've been trying to clean that up since the spring, since when they drafted him, and they don't want regression in that standpoint. So they continue to hammer that point home. And then, of course, the offensive line that will once again be looking at its fifth different starting lineup in 5 weeks. And in fact, I mean, the moving parts there, City So might not be ready for this game. Fedarian Lowe appears that he will be ready for this game. They just stuck Caden Wallace on injured reserve. You want to talk about one of the players that you wanted to see develop this year? Wallace was one of them. Now he's going to be gone for at least 4 games with the ankle injury. Nick Leverett, who filled in for David Andrews, who's now also on IR, he's dealing with an ankle. It's just, who knows if they'll be able to finish the game on Sunday with what they started with. That's how beaten up they are up front. But really, I want to just kind of point that part out to you, that I don't think we're at this, like this, the word used was mutiny by the team reporter. I don't think we're there yet, but it's been going down the wrong road. And then you kind of put that up against how Mayo's talked about the defense, and the defense it's been a player's problem, not a coaching problem. And again, where's Mayo come from? Comes from a defensive background. DeMarcus Covington is his chosen guy as the defensive coordinator. You know, of the few hires that Mayo really had control over, that was certainly one of them. That was the biggest one. And that group has absolutely gone in the wrong direction. We saw them look outstanding in week 1 against speaking of dysfunctional, the Bengals. That first week were a mess. You know, Jamar Chase not even getting off the field, yelling at officials, yelling at his coaches, the whole contract thing. T. Higgins was out of that game. They were not prepared to play, which has been a Cincinnati problem under Zach Taylor in September for as long as he's been there. But since week 1, Patriots have given up 327 yards passing to Geno Smith in week 2, 284 yards passing at a 77% completion rate to Aaron Rodgers in that Thursday nighter in a game they were never in, and never, ever once threatened to make that a football game or threatened to stop Rodgers in that Jets offense. The Jets were the only ones that stopped themselves in that game. And then, of course, gave up 431 total yards against the 49ers in San Francisco, and a ton of explosive plays, right? Which we're just not used to seeing. I think I wrote for Boston Sports Journal in my weekend notebook that, the number of explosives that they gave up versus San Francisco is, in previous years, the kind of stuff the Patriots wouldn't give up for a month or 2 total. And they gave up that many in the game. Brock Purdy throwing for nearly 300 yards. Jordan Mason rushing for 123. Remember, no Christian McCaffrey, a limited Deebo Samuel. Like, they weren't hitting on full cylinder, and yet they still ran amok, winning 30-13. We talked to Covington on Thursday. Maybe it's because he feels so confident that this is the week that they can get right, that he spoke with a little bit of, what's the word? There was a little cockiness to it. Like, he was even talking about the Dolphins offense and saying, they're an explosive offense, best believe I'm not going to be fooled by what they did last week. And then he said, and they'd best not believe and be fooled by what we did the past week. And I wanted to raise my hand and say, you mean the past 3 weeks? We haven't been able to solve the problems that have plagued you, the blown edges. You keep talking about it week after week, and yet it keeps happening. And Covington did say it got cleaned up as the game went on in San Francisco. But again, when that's one of the most important things coming into the game, and you go out of your way and blow it early on, it's like, well, are the right people listening? Do you have the attention of your team? And we heard later in the week, obviously, Jabril Peppers, Devon Godchow talking about some guys on the defense playing selfishly. Not saying they were selfish as a group, but selfish plays, and selfish plays lead to breakdowns. And I thought, during the course of Sunday's game, there were several examples of that beyond the blown edges. The touchdown pass to George Kittle was a great one. I think it was illustrated by Greg Olson in the broadcast, where Marcus Jones has George Kittle covered. He's got that play dealt with. But Del Pettis, the safety, who was in there in part because Kyle Duggar is injured and likely not going to play this weekend, he decides to jump on Kittle instead of driving down on the crossing route. And that was his responsibility, to drive down on the crossing route. And so what that did was it made Marcus Jones pause for a second. or split second even. And that allowed Kittle from being covered to uncovered. And granted, he still had to make a tremendous catch with three defenders sort of hanging off him. But the point being that throw probably doesn't even get made if Pettis does what he's supposed to do, because Marcus had it locked up. And those are the sorts of things that are happening. Jalen Hawkins on the deep post to I believe it was Debo, when the Patriots had made it a 20-10 game. Same sort of thing. He starts to cheat down as a single high safety on a crossing route when he's got to help in the middle. He's the lone safety back in the middle, and all of a sudden, boom, as quick as you had some momentum and felt like maybe you were playing yourself back into the game, they hit you with a 53-yard pass, and you're back to, well, we don't belong here. And indeed, they haven't proven to belong here, at least for the last two games definitively, but even some of the way they handled that Seattle game in week 2 that we sort of glossed over because they came so close to winning, some of those issues, some of the inability to stop being error repeaters came up in that game. And it wasn't just on the field, but some of the coaching stuff as well. I'm curious to see how the Patriots approach this game. I would think that if I'm Covington, I am putting someone over the top of Hill. I am dealing with Jalen Waddle with Gonzalez, and I am putting everybody else up in the box and saying, you're not going to be able to run on us, and we don't think that you can throw on us. And this will be another game where they have to play the edge and play it well, because Huntley can run. It's probably the thing that he does best. I mean, I forgot, by the way, how small he is. You see him in the pocket. It's like, might as well have Pop Douglas playing quarterback for them. But this is one of those games where, for both teams, I think they're both saying, like, if we don't get it now, are we ever going to get it? At least the Dolphins had playoff aspirations and have a massive injury at quarterback, the guy that drove the engine for them. The Patriots are, they've had their share of injuries, obviously Barmore being the big one, now having Andrews, Bentley, so forth and so on. But they were still a flawed team. They're still not going to be a team that was going to threaten for the playoffs, but I don't think we thought that it would be this bad this early. We'll see if they can get a win, stop the bleeding. I think they need it. Everybody. I think they need a jolt of confidence in that locker room. All right, let's go on to the next game, a game that, Will's not here, so can I make fun of the Jets while he's not here? Jets Vikings in London, 9:30 a.m. game. And the big question for me is, can Aaron Rodgers solve the Brian Flores defense? And if you watched Rodgers this year, removing the Patriots game, when the Patriots let him run around and make plays, he hadn't completed a pass outside the tackle box going into week 3. He completed 5 or 6 in that game, ran for a couple first downs. We discussed it on the pod a couple weeks ago. It was a hot mess. But before that, and then, of course, last weekend against Denver in the rain at MetLife, he looks like a 40-year-old quarterback. And he got beat up in that game. He has a swollen knee that he'll be dealing with. He'll take that with him. He's taking that with him to London. They're already in London. Again, a 9:30 kickoff. He got the snot kicked out of him in that one. Denver, what I loved about Denver's approach, and I give Vance Joseph credit, again, Denver 2-2, wouldn't have guessed it. Probably don't deserve to be 2-2 with the way their offense is played. He said, we're going to blitz you, and we're going to do it right away. And they blitzed them on the first play, and Rodgers didn't like it, and they kept doing it. And that's what they've done all year long. Some metrics have them in the 53, 54% for the season. Next gen stats, which I'm going with here, has them at 49%. That leads the league. They bring the blitz. They blitz the crap out of Rodgers. He never looked comfortable in that game. That offense looked impotent, and they lose in the rain to a Bo Nix-led Denver team. Bo Nix threw for -7 yards in the first half. They lost to a team with a quarterback threw for -7 yards in the first half and finished with 60 on the game. The Vikings, what do? Well, they love to blitz too. Next Gen Stats has them at 41.3%. Flores, it's not just the blitzes, though. It's a simulated pressures. Where's it coming from? Rodgers is so methodical with what he does, and we know he loves to. He is part of what makes Rodgers Rodgers, but it's also part of what drives people nuts. Is like he thinks he's smarter than everyone else, and at times he has been. Right? He's very good at the line of scrimmage, so he changes the play, changes check this, check, get out of that, boom, 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 takes the clock down, runs the play. He might not know exactly where it's coming from when it comes to Flores. He didn't know when you went back and watched the Denver game over as I did, where it was coming with the Broncos. And I think Flores is going to embrace that. And I don't know that if Rodgers physically trusts the Achilles enough at this point, and if he trusts the people around him. And I think one of the things that's become very clear, and I thought I saw some good signs in that Thursday nighter against the Patriots, where even though he and Garrett Wilson weren't on the same page, he kept going back to him because he understands how important it was. There were a lot of clips circulating this week. And then I went back and watched just to make sure they weren't like taken out of context or like, oh, Garrett was really open. No, Garrett was open a lot and he wasn't getting the football. And I don't know, just something to put on your radar, because I think I might have said Garrett Wilson would be the offensive player of the year this year, because I just figured he's going to go over 100 catches with Rodgers as quarterback. And they cooked all summer long. Anybody who was at Jets training camp, that's what they talked about. But to this point, it's not great. We heard Wilson sort of speak out this week, and it wasn't as inflammatory as some of the social media clips made it sound out to be. But basically, the huge takeaway here is he doesn't feel like the Jets offense is complex enough. And I would totally agree with him. I think what they do is so simple, and I think it's simple because that's how Aaron wants it. And Aaron has become so risk adverse, and this dates back to his time with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. He doesn't like to throw interceptions. If it's not open right away, he's just taking the check down and getting out of there. And that means a lot of 2, 3, 4 yard throws and not even waiting for someone like Wilson to run a deep out or comeback and see if he's open. It's like, oh, that's open. I'm getting rid of it. I'm getting rid of it. And we know that his relationship with the offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, and Nathaniel Hackett's not yelling at him, telling him, what the hell are you doing? You got to get the ball to Garrett more often, or you got to stay in the pocket and keep things live a little bit longer. So it's just something to watch. And then on top of that, now you have Davante Adams still looming. And I was joking with Will. I think I tweeted him when all the news came out that he's asking for a trade. And then, of course, like pretty much right after, it's like, he really wants to go to the Jets, which, we knew that. We've been talking about that since the spring. Is that going to make Garrett happy? I read quotes from Garrett saying like, if it helps us win, great. Well, you're already not getting the ball enough. And we know that Rodgers and Adams have this relationship dating back to their time with Green Bay, where they both, put up their greatest numbers. Where's he going to go first? He's going to go to Adams. So that's an interesting one, because I'm convinced that trade's going to happen, although maybe not immediately. Adams still dealing with a hamstring. I'm sure the Raiders are still hoping for a second-round pick and something else. I don't believe they're going to get it. And, of course, the longer you wait, trade deadline's not until November 5th, although I'm sure the Jets would like it done sooner than that, the less money you have to pay him. And Adams will have to, I believe, rework his deal a little bit. But that's just another piece of this thing. And then, of course, they're going to look across the sidelines, and they're going to see Sam Darnold. And that's going to give Jets fans, I don't know, the chills, the heebie-jeebies, whatever. Obviously, he was their quarterback for, I think he started 38 games there, and it didn't go well. Obviously, one of the top 5 pick. And there's a lot of talk this week about whether or not the Jets failed Sam Darnold, who is now lashed on in Minnesota and is having a terrific start to the season. And we see him do this sort of before with Carolina for 3 games, and then he fell off the map and was replaced. But thus far, with Kevin O'Connell as the offensive coordinator, Darnold looks like, there's still little shades of old Darnold, right, where he wants to put the ball in harm's way, and kind of, he's going to do it a little bit. He's thrown 3 picks so far. He's also thrown 11 touchdowns. That leads the league. He has the highest passer rating in the NFL as well. So he's in a good place. Obviously has some great pieces around him, but is very supported by O'Connell. Wasn't really well supported by the Jets. Adam Gase, remember that disaster? Darnold was asked about, and I thought his response to his time with the Jets was great. He said, I had a lot of opportunities. I could have played better. Didn't blame it on anybody else, even though, look, some of it did fall on the Jets and their organizational failures and things of that nature and what they surrounded him with. But at the same time, like, hey, dude, I was 20 years old when I came in there. I didn't play good ball. Didn't play good ball for a bunch of years, and I don't blame him for moving on. They moved on. He's bounced around. Maybe he's found a home, although, again, it's just a 1-year deal with Minnesota, who drafted J.J. McCarthy in the first round. But just kind of fascinating to see that matchup. And then there's one other little piece of this game, and that's Justin Jefferson versus Sauce Gardner. Jefferson is the best receiver in football. I think if you ever even doubt it, go back and watch, if you can game rewind or on NFL Network, go watch the game against Green Bay last week and just see how much of what happens is because of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Naylor catching passes, making big plays because they had to double Jefferson all game long. No Jair Alexander in that game. So we're just going to double him. And Darnold was able to spread the ball around, and those guys were able to make plays. I'm assuming Sauce is going to get a healthy dose of Jefferson. The two have met once before. Jefferson wasn't playing with much at that point, had just 3 catches for 14 yards in that game. I expect this one to be a little bit different, but we like premier matchups, and certainly getting to see Justin Jefferson versus Sauce Gardner. It's kind of awesome. I'm definitely looking forward to that. Let's bring you a word from our sponsor, if you will. Prize Picks. Who doesn't love Prize Picks, guys? You can win now up to 100 times your money in Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. And who hates that? You get a guy in an injury and you're like, I already lost. No. They have injury protection. That's pretty important. So sign up today. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Just put in the code CLNS. Get you some free money. You don't even have to win. It gets you some free money. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value to your lineups. And it's simple as more or less. Do you think Justin Jefferson is going to have more than 80 whatever yards it is this week? More or less. Pair that with at least one other and have a chance to win some money. As I said, I'll give you my picks later on. But I'm enjoying Prize Picks. It's been a lot of fun. Let's go to our next game. The 2-2 Ravens at the 1-3 Bengals. And I ask myself one big question about this one. Can the Bengals stop the Ravens' runaway freight train rushing attack right now that is number 1 in the National Football League, of course, headed by Derrick Henry? We talked in the preseason about him likely putting up some good numbers this year, even if he's not the same type of back. And the first couple of weeks, you're like, it doesn't look that great. You know, they're trying to do some stuff out of pistol. He's a downhill runner. What are they doing? Well, guess what? They've won the last 2 games because they scrapped all that nonsense. We're a power running football team. That is what Harbaugh has said to everybody else. That's what he said to his team. Lamar Jackson's thrown the ball just 33 times in the last 2 weeks, both victories, because the running game, which he is also obviously a massive part of, has been going bananas. As I mentioned, number 1 in the league in rushing. Derrick Henry, his numbers have gone up each and every week of this season, including last week when he rushed for nearly 200 yards, had the 87-yard touchdown in which he reached 21.29 miles per hour at 247 pounds. Like, the dude is a freak. He has 480 yards rushing already this season. And I really appreciate just the Ravens sort of, hey, look, first 2 weeks, put a lot on Lamar's plate. We weren't getting enough out of Derrick. They saw something in Derrick that said to themselves, no, he's still got the juice that you were wondering if he had or not. And what's interesting now is because of the ability of the Ravens to throw the football in those first 2 weeks, spread it around. Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely. Mark Andrews still hasn't gotten truly involved yet. Rashad Bateman, even Nelson Aguilar making big catches for them. That Henry is now facing the lightest boxes, which is 7 or less defenders in his career. You know what that means? That means that he's building up more speed before he gets to contact. You know, before when he was with the Titans or even in the beginning of this year, running into these tight boxes, right? Well, you're getting hit sometimes in the backfield, sometimes at the line of scrimmage. Patriots fans know, like Ramondre in that first game when he broke all those tackles, like so many times, he was having to make a play before he even got to the line of scrimmage. Well, that was Derrick in Tennessee. Derrick in Baltimore is getting a full head of steam. And then you're seeing guys saying, I'm not going to get that straight arm and get shoved into next week. I'm not going to lower, like, you have to make business decisions when Derrick Henry is coming at you with a full head of steam. And so I'm curious to see if they can keep that going because the Bengals, as we know, cannot stop the run, or at least haven't been able to for this part of the season. Stevenson and the Patriots ran all over them. They got run on by the Panthers last week. I guess the good bit of news here for the Bengals is some of their defensive line pieces are getting healthy. They expect BJ Hill back this week. Miles Murphy, McKinney, who plays on the inside, he's expected back. So maybe with some reinforcements, they can be a little bit more stout against the run, because to this point, I mean, they even put that game against the Panthers in jeopardy a little bit because they weren't able to control Hubbard and the Panthers rushing attack. And look, they're 1-3, and they got their first win last week. They need to keep it rolling and sort of stop Baltimore steamrolling here and getting back to the team that I thought they were going to be when I predicted them to go to the Super Bowl. Also, quickly on the Bengals offense, they didn't produce well enough in week one. And we know, as I mentioned, the Jamar Chase histrionics and Higgins didn't play in that game with the hamstring. And Burrow looked like he was, like not feeling the wrist. But even then, Hudson, the tight end, with the ball out like a loaf of bread, if you remember that in the first week, going in for a touchdown, should have been a touchdown. Like, it was a 16-10 game. Like, that could have made the difference in the game. The offense has been cooking since then. They are top 5 in EPA, DVOA, like whatever metric you want to measure them by. And Burrow looks like the Burrow of old. He's picking guys apart. Jamar Chase has gone nuts, even though he's been double teamed, I think, more than any receiver in the National Football League this year. Higgins is getting up to speed the last couple of games. Yoshavas, the kid from Princeton, pretty good third receiver. So, and they found a running game last week against Carolina, at least with Chase Brown and Zach Moss. So their offense is cooking. And if their defense can just be competent, maybe, is that too much to ask? Competent? Louis Anarumo, one of the best defensive coordinators, at least I believe he was. Last year didn't go great, but they had all kinds of issues, health-wise, safety issues, which he relies on the safeties. Well, now they got kind of the pieces they want. Again, dealing with health, but he needs to adjust and be better than he's been, because it hasn't gone remotely like anybody would have thought it would have gone. Let's now go to the Bills visiting the Texans. Both teams 3-1. Bills had been rolling, had looked like all the talk about them not being what they've been in the past and taking that step back. The first 3 weeks, they were like, shut up, guys. You don't know the hell you're talking about. Plus, we have Josh Allen, and Josh Allen is awesome. And even after the loss to the Ravens, they got beat pretty bad, 35-10. Allen still did some pretty amazing things in that game, just didn't get any help from anybody else. And then the Texans, who are kind of they're 3-1, and it looks better on paper than it's actually looked in reality. And I'll get into that. In fact, right now, let's do that part of it. So when I look at the Texans, what jumps out to me is, despite their offense scoring a lot of points again, and despite CJ Stroud putting up great numbers, they have been in 3rd and long more than any team in the National Football League. 3rd and long is 7 yards plus. They have averaged 3rd and 10.5 this season. So they're actually going backwards on 1st and 2nd down far too often for their liking. They haven't been able to run the ball since week 1, and Joe Mixon got hurt in week 2. So perhaps that's the correlation there. But the offensive line has struggled with the backups. And you would think, even with the backups, because you have Stroud, because you have Nico Collins, because you have Stephon Diggs, because you have Schultz, that they have enough pieces on the outside. Tank Dell, well, you have to defend that part first. So we should be able to sneak a draw in here, or some delayed handoffs, or even get the screen game going. None of that stuff is happening for them, and it's putting way more weight on CJ Stroud. And to his credit, he's playing pretty awesome again. So for the guys who sit the young quarterback, don't sit the young quarterback, I think he's clearly the anomaly and has just taken the world by storm. Jaden Daniels has done it through 4 weeks. We'll see if Jaden Daniels can do it through the course of a 17-game season. But Stroud did it for a 17-game season last year. He's carrying it over into year 2 and just making a lot of off-schedule plays as well, which he didn't have to do as much of last year. But I think, quite frankly, they're putting a big burden on him. And when you go into this game, if you're D'Amico Ryans and you're the offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, who was everybody's favorite last year, interviewed for 5 head coaching jobs, even though the end of last year, you started to see some cracks in his approach. Well, I think now you've seen, dude, Slowick's got to step up his game. He's riding the coattails of CJ Stroud and some of these other playmakers making plays more than it is his design. He's put them in some bad spots, and Stroud continues to bail him out. So Slowick's got to get his stuff together. And I wonder if this is the week that he and D'Amico Ryan sit down and Ryan says, look, the Bills can't stop the run. And I know we haven't been able to run the ball, but if we're ever going to get this kick started, if we're ever going to find a way to balance our attack somewhat, then we have to do it this week. And I think we talked about this on Monday about the Bills and the Ravens game. Is the Bills are super light on the interior. And in fact, their best interior player, Ed Oliver, won't play in this game. He got hurt late this week in practice. He is out for the game, according to Sean McDermott. I'm taping this on early Friday afternoon. So he's out. So their best player, even though he's a lighter interior guy, he's not even going to be in there. Teron Johnson, who is so good at nickel and so good in the run game, that a lot of times they just stay in nickel. He has been out with the broken forearm. He's not going to play again this week. So they continue to have to adjust. And you've seen some issues there as well. And of course, no Matt Milano, who is their best defensive player and one of the better defensive players in the league. But, the injuries have stacked up for him. So with their second level being lighter, the interior being lighter, that's an easy path to sort of take some of the burden off of Stroud, maybe control the clock a little bit. Obviously, the less time Josh Allen has the ball in his hands, the less opportunities he has to be Superman. So I'm curious to see if the Texans can lean into that and get something going. As for the Bills, Josh is still going nuts. And it's, even as I mentioned, after the Ravens game, there were some metrics that will tell you that was one of the worst games he's played at quarterback. But if you watch the game, you wouldn't felt that way. So sometimes, again, the numbers, you can make the numbers work for you if you want. But he has been pressured a ton this year, and he is lighting up pressure. He's facing a ton of man coverage this year, which, oh, by the way, that's what the Texans like to do. And he is lighting that up as well. So some of the things that the Texans get a lot of pressure and will blitz, he feeds on. He won't have Khalil Shakir, who's probably been his most dependable, best receiver. He's going to have to, the everybody eats philosophy that they've taken since Stephon Diggs was traded away in the offseason. Some of those guys are going to have to step up. They've pointed to Curtis Samuel. It's a free agent signing for them who's done absolutely nothing so far. He will fill the Shakir role, and maybe he can give them some Shakir-like plays. But losing Shakir is a big deal. He's a good player. He's a guy that a lot of teams missed on. Got picked in the 5th round. But Allen is going to have to deliver big boy football. The Texans allowing 57.3% completion rate and 161 yards passing during the course of the year so far. James Cook, very quiet, and some of that was game script against the Ravens. I would expect him to be more involved in this game. And then, hey, there's the Steph Diggs revenge game, which quite frankly, I don't care about. I know some people do. I enjoyed covering Steph in my previous life. I think he's a good dude at heart, but he's got the selfish gene like a lot of these receivers do. And he washed himself out of one situation, but he's in another one where, even though he's the number 2 receiver behind the great Nico Collins, is, by the way, on pace to have over 2,000 yards receiving. Like, I don't want to gloss over that. He's been awesome so far. Wrote about him in the Boston Sports Journal a couple weeks ago. Diggs is just the secondary piece here. He's not getting the same touches that he would have even been getting in Buffalo, where he was complaining about the number of touches. So we'll see if that marriage can continue to last, or if he starts to get frustrated, especially if they lose a couple games here or there. I'm going to wrap it up with one last game. That's going to be the Cowboys, who are 2-2 against the 3-1 Steelers. This, to me, is like, I'm old. This is a childhood memory. This is a rivalry game. They met in Super Bowls. They were the 2 predominant franchises for a while there. San Francisco came in, and then obviously in the early 2000s, the Patriots ran the show for the better part of 2 decades. Hold, please. I think this is a massive game for the Cowboys, even though it's not a conference game, because aside from week 1 against Cleveland, and that was about as much about Cleveland as it was about the Cowboys don't look good. And I think what's surprising about the Cowboys is how hard it is for them to play offense. And they just paid Dak, and they just paid CD, and they've invested some resources at tight end and at wide receiver. Jalen Tolbert's a 3rd-round pick. They obviously got Brandon Cooks, and Cooks will miss this week's game again. He had a knee procedure, has an infection, so he's going to miss a little bit more time there. But last year, they were excellent offensively for a better part of the year and then started to fade at the end of last season. And if you go into some of the numbers about what was happening, Dak was on one last year. Like for the first 12 or 13 games, I think we talked about it. He was an MVP, like legitimate, like front running candidate for MVP. And then they dropped off and he dropped off because he was so locked in. He wasn't missing those tight window throws. Well, now he's not in the same form, and he doesn't have the same guys outside separating or the same level of talent or the guys that like Cooks, who when he was playing, like, he's another year older. Like it's not the same guy anymore, right? CD missed all of training camp before he came back. So even though he's come out and looked pretty good and had his moments, he's still not the CD that we saw last year who caught 125 passes or something. So it's been more difficult for them to play offense. And at running back, it's been a debacle, right? So they let Tony Pollard go. Pollard wasn't very good for them last year, coming off the broken foot. By the way, he looks pretty good for Tennessee, but again, it's serious injury. It takes a little bit of time to feel right. Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott, and they even went into the Dalvin Cook may be activated for this game. Dalvin Cook hasn't made an impact in an NFL game in like 3 years, but that's where they're kind of at right now. So more on Dak, less separation, a lack of a running game. I think they're averaging 74 yards rushing per game, and it's not even a good 74. You know what I mean? Like sort of they go through the Shanahan scheme where like, we're just going to run the ball 25, 30 times, like whatever it is. And eventually they sort of wear you down, but you're making plays off the play action because everything looks the same. This is sort of the older version of the West Coast team, and they're not getting those same types of plays off it or the same kind of openings that Shanahan has gotten with his offense over the years. So more difficult for them. And now dealing with massive injuries on the defensive side of the ball. Micah Parsons, week to week with the ankle, doesn't feel like he's going to play. Again, I'm taping this Friday afternoon. Dallas hasn't put out there like he's out, so don't know officially if he's out, but I would be surprised if he plays. DeMarcus Lawrence is out probably 4 to 8 weeks with the plantar fasciitis injury. That doesn't sound great, and he was already slowing down to begin with. They're going to have to lean on a rookie who I liked coming out of the draft. They talk about him, Marshawn Nealon, is going to get more snaps for them, and he's been fairly productive so far. But like Diggs is also on the injured list this week, so they're not healthy. They're not playing their best football. But still, this is a game, even though it's in Pittsburgh, that they should have enough, because I'm still not buying that Pittsburgh is a 3-1 football team. And even though they came within a whisker of being 4-0, they're doing a nice job, Pittsburgh is, of managing Justin Fields. And he's growing, which is nice to see. Like a quarterback who had no plan and wasn't surrounded by much in Chicago. He's moved on to Pittsburgh. It's a 1-year deal, right? He and Russell, it was going to be Russell. Well, Russell gets hurt. Fields is taking it, and it's his job at this point, I feel like. Completing 70% of his passes, 3 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns, just has the 1 interception. He's making throws and trying throws that he wouldn't in his previous iteration in Chicago. So that tells me that Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, formerly the offensive coordinator with Tennessee and obviously the head coach the last 3 years with Atlanta, has done a nice job of finding out what he does well and figuring out a way to build up his confidence such that you're seeing a more confident passer. And that's been the knock on him, right? Is that he has this great arm, but it takes him too long to process, and he just doesn't trust it. He won't throw into those tight windows. And even at the beginning of the year, they didn't throw in the middle of the field in that Atlanta game because they didn't want to chest Jesse Bates, who's a terrific safety. But sort of as you've seen them progress, he's pushing the ball to places that he wouldn't, and the offense is opening up a little bit. He even mentioned like we opened it up a little too late in this last game because they are trying to play a certain way. They're trying to win with defense and keep it close, ball control, and not ask him to do too much. They got down to, I believe it was a 17-0 hole against Indianapolis. They had to let him go, and he brought him back. 27-24. He played some good football in that game. He was a handful. So he is growing, but it feels like this game matters more to Dallas than it does to Pittsburgh in terms of, I'm a big believer in who's the more desperate team. And if Dallas has any balls, then they're the more desperate team for this game. And they have to figure out a way to shut down Justin Fields. And I think clearly their plan should be similar to what the Patriots would do to Huntley, right? Like, go ahead, beat us, throw over the top, make tight window throws. We're just going to crowd the box, and we're going to sit on the short stuff. And if you can beat us downfield, we tip our cap to you. God bless. And if you can't, well, then we're probably going to win the football game. So that to me is how that should play out. We'll see, because Dallas is a schizophrenic team, and you always wonder about Mike Zimmer is out of the game, comes back. The Mike Zimmer defense has not grabbed hold just yet. So that's the last one I want to look at. Also got to tell you about Game Time, because games everywhere, and you want to go to games and you want to do it easily. Like, you go to other sites and it's a disaster. Game Time, not that way. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite team play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I mean, who doesn't want that, right? And you get the best price. That's what it's all about. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time, and it's also time for my prize picks. What do we got? I hit a couple last week. A couple didn't happen. Derek Carr threw for more than 225 yards. Didn't expect that. Had the groin injury. Olave had the hamstring injury. These things happen. Brock Purdy, though, I think he topped his rushing total in the first quarter. So I'll try to be better this week. What I got for you. How about Derrick Henry? More than 85.5 yards rushing. I think they're just going to hammer Cincinnati, even with more health on that defensive line, and dare them to stop Derrick Henry. And right now, I think he's rolling so good, and they're rolling so good and feeling so good about it. 85.5 feels like it's a little light to me. So more there. Aaron Rodgers, less than 225.5 yards passing. Again, I think he's going to have a hard time with Flores' defense. I think a lot of stuff's coming out quick and short. Check downs galore. So he might complete 23, 24 passes, but not throw for 225 yards. That's where my brain is at. So I would stick with that. Garrett Wilson, as I talked about sort of their relationship and how things are going, less than 55.5 yards receiving. One of these days he's going to pop off. I don't think it happens in this game. And then you can play around. They have the Devil, the Goblin, like, yeah, whatever it is. Like, you'll see the thing when you go on Prize Picks. Mason, the running back for San Francisco. Play around with it and get him to 69.5. I'll take in the over on that. It's on the odds a little bit, but that is a good number. And also, one more, a little bonus pick for you, because he has become one of my guilty pleasures. Justice Hill, longest reception. Over, more than 11.5. So Mason, more than 69.5. Justice Hill, longest reception, more than 11.5. Derrick Henry, more than 85.5. Aaron Rodgers, less than 225.5. And Garrett Wilson, less than 55.5. Thank you for listening to me for 43 minutes. God bless you all. Don't forget to tell your friends, like, subscribe, leave a nice review. That's it. We'll see you on Monday. Enjoy the weekend.